that had existed since before the first stars were born. They were not creatures made of flesh and blood like most living things. They were patterns of energy, ancient and patient, woven into the very fabric of space and time itself. No one knew how they came to be. Perhaps they had always existed. Perhaps they were older than the universe itself. Long ago, when they first realized they would live forever, they chose a purpose for themselves. They would become the keepers of all sounds in creation. They would record and preserve every noise, every whisper, every vibration that echoed through the cosmos. It was a task that would take eternity, and eternity was exactly what they had. Their archive was vast beyond measure. It contained the death songs of dying suns, the deep groaning sounds that stars made as they collapsed into black holes. It held the gentle hum of nebulae being born, clouds of gas and dust slowly coming together to create new worlds. They had recorded the clicking language of insect-like beings on a planet made entirely of crystal. They had preserved the whale-like songs of gas creatures that swam through the atmospheres of giant planets. Every civilization that rose and fell left its sounds behind in the archive. They collected them all without judgment. They did not decide what was important or unimportant. They simply preserved everything, because everything might matter someday. For 3 billion years, they traveled the galaxies. They sent out collector nodes, small pieces of themselves that could drift through space and gather sounds. These nodes were patient. They would wait for thousands of years just to record the precise moment when a binary star system began its final dance of destruction. They believed they had heard everything worth hearing in the universe. They had grown comfortable in their certainty. The cosmos held no more surprises for them. They were wrong. The collector node that found Earth was old even by standards. It had been drifting through an unremarkable arm of an unremarkable galaxy for 200 million years. It passed by countless worlds without stopping. Most planets were silent. Some had simple sounds of wind and water. A few had primitive life that made basic noises. When the node detected the pale blue planet orbiting a yellow star, it almost continued on its way. The readings showed carbon-based life, which was common enough. There was nothing special about carbon. The node had recorded carbon-based creatures on 10,000 other worlds. But something made it pause. Something in the atmospheric readings caught its attention. There were patterns of sound waves rising from the planet's surface that the node had never encountered before. Complex patterns, strange patterns, patterns that did not fit any category in the vast archive. The node descended through the atmosphere to investigate. What it found changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. The dominant species on this world called themselves humans. They were unremarkable in many ways. They had 2 arms, 2 legs, and soft bodies that could be easily damaged. They lived short lives, rarely more than 100 orbits around their sun. They were not the strongest creatures they had encountered, nor the most advanced. But they made a sound that no other species in 3 billion years of collecting had ever made. At first, the node could not understand what it was hearing. The sound came from the humans' mouths like speech, but it was not speech. It carried no information. It communicated no specific meaning. It was not a warning cry to signal danger. It was not a mating call to attract partners. It was not a territorial declaration to drive away enemies. The sound served no purpose that the node could identify. And yet the humans made this sound constantly. They made it when they gathered in groups. They made it when they were alone. They made it when their bodies were stimulated in certain ways. They made it when they witnessed something unexpected. They even made it when they observed small animals falling off furniture, which confused the node greatly. The node recorded the sound and sent it back to the main consciousness for analysis. The response came slowly, which was unusual. The processed information faster than light could travel. A slow response meant that something had gone wrong, or that something extraordinary had happened. The message that finally came back was unlike anything the node had ever received. They had played the human sound through their archive. This was standard procedure. They compared new sounds to existing sounds to find patterns and connections. Usually, the process was routine. A new sound would resemble other sounds. It would fit into existing categories. It would make sense. The human sound made no sense at all. When it played through the archive, something unprecedented happened. The other sounds, billions of years of cosmic recordings, began to resonate with it. Ancient vibrations that had been silent for eons seemed to wake up. The death song of a star that exploded a billion years ago hummed in harmony with the human sound. The first radio waves ever produced by a now-extinct civilization pulsed in rhythm with it. It was as if the universe itself had been waiting to hear this particular frequency. They did something they had not done in a million years. They convened. All of them, every pattern of energy scattered across 1,000 galaxies, came together to discuss what the node had found. They analyzed the sound from every possible angle. They broke it down into its component frequencies. They mapped its acoustic signature against the fundamental vibrations of the universe itself, the background noise left over from the moment of creation. What they discovered should have been impossible. The human sound, this purposeless noise that the creatures made for no apparent reason, contained within it every cosmic frequency that existed. The deep hum of rotating galaxies was there. The high-pitched whine of pulsars was there. The ancient echo of the Big Bang itself was there. All compressed, all transformed, all living within this simple biological noise. Other species in the universe communicated. Other species even made music of sorts. But only these short-lived, fragile creatures on their small blue world had ever made this sound. Only they had ever laughed. They had no word for laughter. They had to create one. They spent 10,000 years trying to understand it. They sent more collector nodes to Earth. They recorded billions of instances of human laughter. They categorized it by type, by cause, by duration, by intensity. They documented the laughter of children and the laughter of the elderly. They recorded the loud, explosive laughter of groups and the quiet, private laughter of individuals alone. None of it made sense by any standard measure. Laughter did not help humans survive. It did not help them reproduce. It did not help them find food or avoid predators. By all logical analysis, it should not exist. Evolution should have eliminated it long ago as a waste of energy. But humans kept laughing. They laughed when they were happy. They laughed when they were sad. They laughed when they were terrified. They laughed at death itself. The ancient beyond measure, wise beyond comprehension, could not understand why. They knew only one thing for certain. In all the sounds they had collected across 3 billion years, nothing compared to human laughter. It was unique. It was impossible. It was precious beyond any value they could calculate. And so they made a decision. For the first time in their eternal existence, they would not simply observe and record. They would make contact with the species that had given them the most precious sound in all creation. They would find the humans. They would ask them why they laughed. And they hoped, with something that might have been curiosity or might have been longing, that the answer would make sense. The first message was sent toward the pale blue world. It would take many years to arrive. They were patient. They had been patient for 3 billion years. They could wait a little longer to solve the greatest mystery they had ever encountered. Doctor had spent 23 years listening to the silence between stars. She had made peace with that silence long ago. Some of her colleagues found it depressing, the vast emptiness of space, the apparent loneliness of Earth in the cosmic void, but had learned to find beauty in it. She was the lead researcher at the SETI installation in the desert, one of the driest places on Earth. The air here was thin and clear, perfect for listening to radio signals from space. Giant dish antennas pointed toward the sky, waiting patiently for a message that might never come. Most nights were quiet. The instruments picked up only natural sounds, the hiss of distant quasars, the regular pulses of pulsars, the background noise of the universe itself. Had learned to recognize these sounds the way a sailor learns to recognize the sounds of the sea. The night the message arrived started like any other night. Was reviewing data from the previous week, drinking her third cup of coffee when the alarm went off. At first, she assumed it was a false positive. They got those sometimes. A satellite passing overhead, a burst of interference from some earthly source, a glitch in the equipment. But when she looked at the readings, her coffee cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. The signal was clearly artificial. The pattern was too regular, too structured to be natural, and it was old. The analysis showed it had traveled for hundreds of years to reach Earth. Whatever had sent this message had sent it long before humans had even invented radio. Called her team. Within an hour, every researcher at the installation was crowded around the monitoring station, staring at the data on the screens. No one spoke. No one needed to. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. First contact. But as they analyzed the signal further, their excitement turned to confusion. The message was a recording. That much was clear. But it was not a recording of some alien sound or alien language. It was a recording of human laughter. Specifically, it was a recording from July 20, 1969. The moment when Mission Control received confirmation that Apollo 11 had successfully landed on the moon. The joyous, relieved, triumphant laughter of humans who had just touched another world. Knew this recording well. Everyone who worked at SETI knew it. It was one of the most famous moments in human history, preserved in countless archives around the world. But this version was different. The laughter was there, exactly as it had always been, but it had been enhanced somehow, layered with harmonics that human technology could not produce, and beneath the laughter, almost too quiet to hear, were other sounds, sounds that made his heart beat faster. The regular pulse of a pulsar, the crackling hiss of cosmic background radiation, the deep, slow rumble of galaxies rotating. Someone or something had taken human laughter and woven the sounds of the universe into it. There was more to the message, a second layer that was clearly meant to be decoded, and her team worked on it for months. They tried every decryption method they knew. They consulted with mathematicians and linguists from around the world. The United Nations got involved. Governments demanded updates. When they finally understood the message, wept. The beings who sent it called themselves though that was just the closest approximation in human language. They were ancient, older than the stars themselves. They had been collecting sounds from across the universe for billions of years. And in all that time, in all those billions of years of listening, they had never heard anything like human laughter. The message explained what they had discovered. Human laughter contained frequencies that matched the fundamental vibrations of the universe. When they played it through their archive, sounds that had been dead for eons came alive again. It was as if laughter was the key that unlocked something hidden in the fabric of reality itself. They had a question, a simple question that had consumed them for 10,000 years. Why do you laugh? They wanted to understand. They needed to understand. In their eternal existence, they had collected and preserved countless sounds, but they had never created anything themselves. They had never felt whatever it was that made humans produce this impossible noise. The message ended with a statement that made governments panic and philosophers rejoice. They were coming to Earth, not to conquer, not to study humans like specimens in a laboratory. They were coming to ask their question in person. They wanted to hear the answer from human lips, accompanied by human laughter. Stood outside the research station that night, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, ancient beings were traveling toward Earth. They had crossed billions of years and unimaginable distances because of a sound that humans made without thinking. She thought about all the times she had laughed in her life, the jokes shared with her siblings as a child, the nervous laughter on her first date with her wife, the exhausted, relieved laughter when her daughter was born healthy, the inappropriate laughter at her father's funeral when her brother whispered a joke that their father would have loved. None of it had seemed special at the time. It was just what humans did. But now she understood. Somehow, in their short lives on their small world, humans had stumbled upon something precious, something that beings older than the universe itself had never found. The question was, could they explain it? Laughed softly to herself, alone under the stars. She had no idea how to explain why she had just laughed. It simply happened, like breathing, like blinking. It was the most natural thing in the world. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe that was why they could not understand. They had been thinking about it too hard, looking for logic where there was only life. The news spread around the world within days. Humanity was not alone, and the beings who had found them were coming not as conquerors but as students. They wanted to learn from humans. They believed humans had something precious to teach. For the first time in history, the whole world laughed together. Not at a joke, not at anything funny. They laughed because they did not know what else to do. They laughed because ancient star keepers thought their laughter was the most precious sound in all creation. They laughed because that itself was funny, and sad, and wonderful, and strange, and perfectly human. And in the space between the stars, they heard the echo of that laughter and traveled faster toward its source. They did not arrive in spaceships. They had no need for physical vessels. They were patterns of energy, and they traveled through space as light itself traveled. When they finally reached Earth, they manifested in ways that humans could perceive. They appeared as patterns in the aurora, dancing lights in the northern and southern skies that spelled out messages in mathematics and music. They manifested as gentle interference in radio waves, turning static into symphonies for those who knew how to listen. Most strangely of all, they appeared in dreams. Half the world woke up one morning with fragments of the same dream in their minds. Ancient lights, patient questions, a curiosity so deep it felt like hunger. They did not understand human bodies or human customs. They did not know how to shake hands or bow or wave, but they understood sound better than any being in the universe. So when they spoke to humanity, they spoke through sound. Doctor was the first to have a full conversation with them. Perhaps because she had spent her life listening to the cosmos, she found it easier to hear them than most. Or perhaps they chose her because she had been the first to receive their message. The conversation happened in a dream, but it was more real than any waking moment had ever experienced. She found herself standing in a vast space that seemed to contain all the colors of the universe at once. Before her was a presence she could not describe with human words. It was not a shape or a form. It was a feeling, a sound that had somehow become aware of itself. They showed her their archive. Not all of it, of course. Showing her all of it would have taken longer than her lifetime, but they showed her enough to understand. She heard the sound of a star being born, the great rush of hydrogen igniting for the first time. She heard the crystalline singing of creatures on a world made entirely of ice. She heard the last words of civilizations that had died a billion years ago, preserved forever in the collection. And then they showed her what human laughter looked like in their archive. It was beautiful beyond description. Each laugh was a tiny universe of frequencies, somehow containing within it echoes of the Big Bang itself. When they played human laughter alongside their other recordings, everything seemed to come alive. Ancient sounds harmonized with it. Dead things seemed to wake up. Then they asked their question, the same question they had been asking for 10,000 years. Why do you laugh? Tried to explain. She talked about social bonding, how laughter brought humans closer together. She talked about tension release, how a good laugh could ease stress and fear. She talked about surprise and incongruity, how unexpected things triggered the response. They listened patiently, but she could tell they were not satisfied. These were facts about laughter, not the meaning of it. They already knew the facts. They had studied humans for 10,000 years. They wanted something else. Something could not quite give them. When she woke from the dream, she began reaching out to others who had been contacted. Scientists, philosophers, artists, ordinary people. All of them had struggled to answer the same question. All of them had failed. They did not give up. They continued to appear in dreams and lights and sounds. They asked their question to children and elderly, to people who laughed easily and people who rarely laughed at all. Each answer gave them another piece of the puzzle, but the complete picture remained out of reach. Meanwhile, humanity grappled with what they had revealed. For the first time, humans understood how rare and precious they were, not because they were smart or strong or advanced, because they could laugh. Some people found this funny, some found it terrifying, some found it deeply meaningful. Governments and religious leaders argued about what it meant. Scientists tried to study laughter more intensely than ever before. Artists created works inspired by the idea that human joy echoed through the cosmos. And through it all, humans kept laughing, at jokes and mistakes and absurd situations, at tragedies and triumphs and the simple strangeness of being alive. They laughed because they could not help it, because it was written into their very being. 6 months after they arrived, the answer finally came. It came from a 7-year-old girl named Sofia in Brazil. She had been watching the lights dance in the sky above her city, the aurora that appeared even in tropical latitudes now, carrying the presence of the. Her mother had explained to her that the lights were very old beings who wanted to know why people laughed. Sophia had thought about this very carefully for several days. She was a serious child who took questions seriously. Then one evening, while watching the lights with her mother, she spoke directly to them. She did not know that they could hear her. She did not know that they had been listening to every conversation on Earth for 10,000 years. She simply spoke because she had figured out the answer and wanted to share it. She said, "We laugh because everything is going to end, and that is okay, and that is funny, and that is sad, and that is all the same thing." The lights in the sky went still. For the first time since they arrived, they were completely silent. They had never considered this. In their eternal existence, they had never faced endings. They did not die. They did not lose things. They simply continued forever and ever collecting and preserving. But humans were different. Humans knew from the moment they were born that they would die. Everyone they loved would die. Everything they built would eventually crumble. Their entire species would someday vanish from the universe, leaving nothing behind but the sounds they had made. And yet they laughed. They laughed at death itself. They told jokes at funerals. They made light of their own mortality. They found humor in the absurd brevity of their existence. Not because they did not care, because they cared too much to spend their short lives in despair. Laughter was how humans said yes to life while knowing that life would end. It was how they found joy in a universe that would eventually go cold and dark. It was how they connected with each other across the abyss of individual consciousness, sharing a moment of understanding that needed no words. They finally understood. They had been looking for logic, for function, for purpose. But laughter had no purpose. That was precisely the point. In a universe governed by cause and effect, by entropy and thermodynamics, by the cold mathematics of physics, humans had created something that existed only for its own sake. Laughter was proof that consciousness could find meaning even in meaninglessness. It was evidence that awareness could choose joy even in the face of oblivion. They had collected the sound of the universe for 3 billion years, but they had never created anything themselves. They had never added to the cosmic symphony. They had only preserved what others had made. Now, for the first time, they wanted to create. They worked for 10 years, weaving human laughter into the fabric of their archive, not as a recording this time, but as a living thread. They made it the organizing principle, the key that connected all other sounds. Every sound in their archive was now categorized by which type of human laughter it most resembled. The death of stars was filed under the explosive laughter of release. The birth of new worlds was marked by the delighted laughter of discovery. The long silences between cosmic events were noted as the quiet chuckle of patience. When they finished, the archive was transformed. What had been a collection was now a composition. What had been preservation was now creation. Before they left Earth, they gave humanity a gift. They gave them access to the complete archive. Every sound collected across 3 billion years, translated into forms that humans could perceive. The history of the universe, told entirely in sound, organized by human joy. Scientists wept when they heard the voice of the first star. Artists were inspired by the songs of species that had been extinct for 1 billion years. Ordinary people sat in wonder, listening to the cosmos sing. They also left something else, a message, encoded in the mathematics of music, that would spread slowly through human culture over the coming centuries. The message was simple: you are the only beings we have ever found who know how to end. And because you know how to end, you know how to laugh. And because you know how to laugh, you have given the universe something it did not have before. You have given it joy in the face of oblivion. Thank you. Then the departed, spreading back out across the galaxies to continue their eternal work. But they were different now, changed by their encounter with the strange, short-lived, laughing creatures of Earth. In their archive, accessible to any being in the universe who might one day find it, there was a new category. It was labeled with a notation that would puzzle any species that did not know humans. Category: human laughter. Status: most precious sound in all creation. Reason: it remembers the beginning and accepts the end and finds both worthy of celebration. On Earth, life went on. Humans continued to be born and to die, to love and to lose, to struggle and to triumph. They continued to laugh as they always had, without fully understanding why. But sometimes, late at night, someone would look up at the stars and feel a strange sense of connection, as if the universe itself was listening, as if something ancient and patient was hopping to hear that sound again. And somewhere, in archives that would outlast time itself, they added each new laugh to their collection, not as specimens to be studied, but as gifts to be treasured. The most precious sound in all creation. The sound of beings who knew they would end, and who chose to find that funny and sad and beautiful and perfect. The sound of human laughter, echoing forever through the cosmos.